We're going to rope in Professor Gopal just to unpack some of the things that we've heard this afternoon. Professor Nirmala Gopal, criminologist from the University of KwaZulu-Natal. Ma'am, a very good afternoon to you, and thank you so much for your time. I mean, just help us unpack just some of the things that have been mentioned. I mean, from vetting failures, accountability, you know, the risk of private individuals doing investigative work, wielding influence. Let's start right at the beginning in terms of the qualifications. Paul O'Sullivan's qualifications, especially when you consider, you know, his rise within SAPS and his group executive role then later on at the national key point, AXA airports, have been quite a central concern for MPs. I mean, what do you make of his testimony around this specifically, especially how unusual O'Sullivan's rapid rise as a foreign permanent resident was at the time, and all of these other security roles without necessarily having those security clearances? Or are the MPs making much of nothing, or is there a serious concern there?
Well, good afternoon, Onati, and good afternoon to your viewers. Yeah, I think very interesting, you know, the testimony that's being generated at the moment, particularly from Paul O'Sullivan himself. I think one should look at his rise, the role that he played in South Africa, his influence into very specific security spaces. One should look at that within the ideological context, the ideological or the political context at the time when this was happening. I think by and large what one was able to glean is the fact that he came in through, he entered the country at a time when we were in the midst of the apartheid government. And what it would seem like through his own testimony is that he was able to influence members of parliament, etc. at the time. So by and large, it sounds as though he was influential. He was able to convince them of his qualifications, of his experience, his abilities, etc. And I think what else one should take into account is the fact that the apartheid government would have been quite thin in terms of having individuals purporting to have the experience and the qualifications that Paul O'Sullivan has had. Yeah. Having said that, Anati, I'm not in any way condoning what has happened. And, you know, the way in which he actually entered the country and was able to infiltrate and influence very important structures within the country.
Yeah.
So I think rightfully the current MPs are rightfully concerned. So in as far as that is concerned, I think it's important for them to ask those critical questions to arrive at a particular decision or view.
Yeah, I want us to look at then, what he was saying around Jackie Selebi, saying that, that he was in fact instrumental in his contract with AXA being terminated, and that he also had him fired as a reservist, a police reservist. I mean, he then went back to working at a property development company, he says, and while there, that's when he started digging deeper into Selebi, leading, of course, ultimately to his arrest. He says that when he was asked about his motivation, he says that the motivation was essentially he wanted to live in a country where there was a rule of law and an honest chief of police at the time, and that it was not motivated by the fact that he was fired. I mean, so at what point again does, assisting the state risk having these parallel processes of informal intelligence gathering, given what we know of him also and his previous roles, which is something that was questioned, in terms of the work that he did in the UK particularly?
So I think what it would seem like, Onati, is that Paul O'Sullivan, as he mentions, he's hyperactive, he has a lot of energy. And what comes with that to mind for me is that he seemed to believe that he can solve all of the country's problems, especially within the security cluster. How he arrived at that particular conclusion is anybody's guess.
Yeah.
But I don't, I'm not necessarily convinced that he was discriminated against in terms of wanting to be fired. I think he said he was fired. So I think unless we get the facts, it would be difficult to understand whether the whole Jackie Selebi controversy had anything to do with him or he had anything to do with the Jackie Selebi controversy. And of course, why would he, the critical question perhaps to ask is, it did seem as though he made Jackie Selebi his his unit of inquiry, and then he obsessively went ahead and dug up information and evidence against Selebi, which he believes ultimately got him fired.
Very quickly, Prof, we're wrapping up our conversation. The committee comes back at 6 o'clock. What are some of the things for you that stood out, if you can, very quickly in about 30 seconds?
So I think what stood out for me is, first of all, I think the frustrations amongst the MPs, and I think that was largely caused by the fact that Paul O'Sullivan didn't want to appear in person. But I think what the committee should focus on going forward now is to, not focus on technical details that are wasting a lot of the time, but rather focus on really important and critical information that they absolutely need from Paul O'Sullivan.
Absolutely. Prof, thank you so much for that, and a very good afternoon to you. Appreciate your time. That is Professor Nirmala Gopal, criminologist from the University of KwaZulu-Natal.